What's going on? Eric Levin here. Welcome to The Walk. In this episode, we talked to Chad Jampedro, and Chad is the president of GSF Mortgage and Go Mortgage in Wisconsin. Chad's a great guy, really smart mortgage banker, and definitely a motivator for sure. In this episode, we cover a ton of topics. We talk about fear and panic, which is appropriate. This was shot on March 20th in the early stages of the global pandemic and how it's impacting our industry. We talk about motivating through negativity, motivating through those minor negatives that happen throughout the day of an originator, their customers, their referral partners, and throughout the sales cycle. We talk about clowns. We talk about organizational psychologists. We talk about a lot. I think you'll get something from the episode, and I appreciate you joining the walk.
You're hanging in there, man.
I feel so. I watch your videos, right? So now I'm looking at the studio right now.
Yeah, this is actually coming off. I use a camera, but I got kind of a little setup in here, and I just try to keep it simple as best that I can, and shoot it raw basically. And then I have a guy that does a little bit of work on it. That's about it. And I try to keep it as kind of underproduced as possible.
Yeah.
So that it feels a bit more real, right? I think the minute you start to really produce the stuff, it kind of it feels like a commercial, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So
you do a good job of it. It's been cool watching it progress also, right? Because as I recall, you weren't really using graphics or music a whole lot in the beginning, and then you started adding little pieces.
Yeah, I started out kind of, producing it in where I'd have we had a setup, and you come in, and I don't, I would watch kind of the engagement taper off because it felt kind of boring. So then now I've been shifting it up where I might, now I'm using, instead of a big camera, I just use my iPhone with some settings that camera guy gave me. And I just try to change it a little bit and really shoot for intimacy. That's really what I'm trying to get there, because my approach is different. I sit in the numbers all day. I've got reports and numbers all over, but I almost never talk about that because, what I want to be is just maybe a source of information in and around the thinking that's going on in a salesperson's head, or for someone that's in financial services, because that's not addressed a lot. We could sit and talk all day about KPIs, how many calls do you need to make to do this and do that? And, we immerse ourselves in that. But to me, it's more about that thinking and feeling aspect of it, that if I'm going to consume content, I want that, right? The number aspect of things is going to be different for every person and every company. But I think that thought process, that's the one theme that runs through all of us, right? How you deal with rejection, how do you deal with self-doubt, how do you deal with all of these things that salespeople go through on a day over day, minute by minute basis. And then in an environment like this, wow, it's going to be, that times 10, and for sales folks, what sometimes I have to bridge that gap of understanding with our operational teams and even our marketing teams, is that a salesperson is running this, eventualities down the line. So that one loan, that one transaction, that one lock, that one favor, okay, that they may be asking for is much more than that. In their mind, they think, okay, this borrower, this relationship, how much time I put into that relationship, how long it took me to get into that agency, to get to that realtor, to give me that referral. So that's what they're doing. They're counting kind of all of those eventualities, but it's focused on one transaction. So you have to get your operational teams to understand that, really to kind of sit in that seat and understand what it is that sales. Why are they so upset? Why are they fighting so hard for this? Why is it so important to them? It's just one transaction. Well, as a salesperson, especially if they're good, no transaction is just one transaction. Right. Every transaction is more than just one, and they know that. So, I try to speak to that as much as I can, because I know that's what they're going through. I've been that LO at a table when the money didn't show up, and then everybody at that table is looking at you like you didn't do your job. And there's no darker, emptier feeling than that, for sure.
So let's stay there for a second, because that was something I was thinking about before you and I jumped on this. And by the way, thanks for jumping in. where we will follow the Jampedro model and progress our production as we go. So I appreciate you jumping in with us pretty early on in the game. You know, so the comment that you just made, I think back to when I started off in a sales position, which by the way, I refuse to call it a sales position, because to me, that I'm not selling vacuum cleaners door to door. By the way, no offense to anybody that's selling anything door to door, by the way, but that's not who I thought I was. So I refuse to call it a sales role. But I was 100% commission, right? I had a draw against the commission. I had a family, very young family at the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And so to your point, I was bringing these emotions to the equation to every transaction. And where I slipped up in the beginning was that I was doing exactly what you were just saying, right? I was treating them as transactions. I wasn't treating them as playing the long game or building a
Right.
relationship. Talk a little bit about, like, when you first started off in that similar kind of role, are there stories that you remember of like, you know, I have to get this one deal done or else the whole world's going to come to an end? And then looking back on those
Oh,
experiences?
for sure. So, you know, when I started as a salesperson, I actually moved from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Chicago. And so I'd grown up in Pittsburgh. Everybody that I knew lived there, went to college there, the whole thing. So, you know, pick up, move to Chicago, and
Does that mean you're a Steelers fan and not a Packers fan, or can we even say that?
I am a Steelers fan for sure.
Okay.
I've been living in Wisconsin so long now, that you can't help but kind of be a little bit of a Packers fan because, you know, if they lose, the whole vibe in this office
It changes.
you
That's right.
go up Monday morning, it's like, what is this? You know,
That's
everybody's,
right. All right.
um, but yeah, so I, you know, made that move, and then you're starting from scratch. And then I was a brand new salesperson. And at the time, Phil Siebert, who, you know, now is my partner, and there's a whole trek of, you know, which has been, I've been lucky to kind of start out with, you know, these mentors that were my bosses at the time. And now all these years later, we're partners, and it's like the craziest thing, right? But that's helped me a lot along the way. But he didn't want me there. I mean, he was like this kid from Pittsburgh. I don't, the business was booming at that time, and he's thinking, you know, what, I don't need another project. So, you know, I was kind of handed that set of business cards and, you know, pat on the, you know, the ass and say, get out there, kid, and figure it out.
Right.
And I didn't really have a lot to offer to the marketplace. And I thought I was tough at the time, but I really wasn't. You know, I thought because I had played sports and I had been successful in certain things early in life that I really knew and had it all figured out. But what I didn't realize at the time, I was just used to winning all the time. I was just used to showing up, being good at it. And, you know, in the end, everybody's saying, hey, wow, that was really, really great. Until you know, get into this business and you get told no 1,000 times in a week. And then you show up at realtors' offices and they laugh at you like, what are you even doing here?
Right.
And the amount of rejection that you're taking at that time, it's a tough pill to swallow. And, you know, I had to figure out how to offer the market something of value so people would talk to me. So I really kind of locked into this for sale by owner thing, you know, because I couldn't get realtors to work with me, you know, to let me talk to their buyers, to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I started to go to for sale by owners and knock on the door, and this was pre 9/11, so I was still able to do that, and said, hey, you know, I want to list your property on my hot properties site, but I'm not representing your property. I just represent the financing, and I'll pre-qualify buyers for your home before they can come in. You want to make sure that they have the means to buy it before you show it. And even then, it was free. It was completely free, and I would put a sign in their yard. And my plan was to put, you know, the property in the newspaper. But you know, I was still getting rejected from that. But then it started to take hold, and I could market those properties. Now I had something of value that I could bring to realtors or others and say, I have pre-qualified buyers that I know exactly where they want to live, and they, you know, they're not going to buy that for sale by owner. So will you work with me? And then even in that scenario, you know, I had to do the young salesperson that says, look, I'll give you two and then meet me for lunch and then we'll talk through it. But during that period of time, my wife and I had, my wife, Kelly, she was a teacher. You know, we were high school sweethearts. We met in high school, went through high school, college.
You were the quarterback, right?
Yeah, it's funny. We call it the Jack and Diane story.
See, I knew it.
I played quarterback, and she
Yep.
was cheerleader, and
That's great.
we went out on our first date where so I just showed up at her house one day and just said, look, you're gonna be my
I'm
girlfriend.
the quarterback. You're the cheerleader. Haven't you seen the movies? This is the way it's supposed to go down.
Supposed to go. And then a week later she's like cheering on the sidelines and I run past her for like a touchdown. And I was like, that like locked the deal up.
That's awesome.
Now all these years later. But so we just took the chance, moved together. So she's working, I'm working, and we didn't come from families. I mean, they supported us, but they couldn't support us financially at that time. So we were down when we're bouncing checks. I mean, we're bouncing checks because, you're trying to pay your rent and groceries and all of that, and you're just a commission role, which is different in today's world. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that those times hasn't changed. And I think everybody can tell those war stories of, especially if they've been in sales, during the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, things have changed since then. But that straight commission, we were on fumes and I needed a deal to close. So I got a deal to close that was a HELOC, right? And on a HELOC at the time, our company policy was, and I didn't know it, was that you couldn't charge on a HELOC. You just, you told them. Well, I charged, I think, $500 on the HELOC to get it to close. And, I was going to get this $500. And then Phil Siebert, brings me in. He's like, look, you got to give that money back to the borrower. And then he said, look, I'm going to give you the commission because I know you've been working to get it. And then from there, I went from, 2 deals closed to 2 to 8 to 10 to 19 to, continuing to build it because I started to bring some value. But yes, and even after that, after you build on the sales side, I, ran into tough times even then where, your pipeline dries up and I had to learn how to manage doing loans and getting loans, right? So, doing loans, working on it, pouring your heart into, making a great advantage for your borrower. So that takes time. You got to learn the science of doing loans, but then you also have to go get business. So I had to learn how to deal with that because I was a lot like many originators where I'd have a huge month and then a really weak month and then and then a weak month. And I was having a hard time kind of stringing them together. But really what I didn't realize at the time, I had to get organized. I had to, really focus on personal disciplines. And I also didn't realize how spoiled I was. I thought I worked hard, coming into that. I was completely spoiled. And, when you're in this business, man, a 10-hour day is damn near every day. And I just really kind of learned what hard work would be at that time. So, it was a good lesson. And
You just broke the golden rule of production. So we'll just keep that. We'll keep that
okay.
With the phone ringing in the background. Now, so I think anybody that started off in origination, like so many people that you manage and you mentor today, you have those experiences. I think it's kind of interesting, right? What we're going through today, and you've been putting out some really good content on LinkedIn and probably other social media that I might not be on. With videos and just reminding people to focus on the things you can control and to make an effort at least to manage your emotions and stay positive. So one of the things that one of your recent videos, you talked about fear and panic a little bit, and that I would think, right, and I think I experienced it as well. I mean, originators, and I include producing managers and managers of originators in this business as well, we have lots of moments of fear, don't we? I mean, throughout the day, throughout the week, the month, you're talking about your KPIs or maybe a goal that you set for yourself that you're trying to achieve for your family. But the problem is when things then start to creep into panic mode, because the fear side, you were talking about monkey brain on one of your videos here recently, and the fear side to me still relates to prep. If I'm in fear, that's not necessarily a terrible thing because it's probably forcing me to prep for something that I wasn't prepping for otherwise. But then when we move to fear, we start making bad decisions. You probably experienced that yourself. You've probably seen a lot of it. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that relationship between fear and panic, and also how it relates to originators in our industry.
Right. I think that as sales folks, we're the only beings on the planet that can be supremely self-confident and self-doubting in the same breath. Right. So, we could be, and it's the reality. We are both of those things at the same time. So in that, you realize fear is certainly a motivator, and it can be an empowering emotion if you channel it properly. So when you think about, the fear aspect of things, it's notice, right? That kind of goes back to, our instincts. It's these things are important, and they need attention. Now, instinctually it's, do we fight or do we flight? Now in a salesperson, they're going to fight, right? They're going to put the energy into it that they need. But where it starts to spin out of control is when that fear kind of bubbles into panic, and now that's counterproductive. So it's not fueling you, it's paralyzing you. And there's a big difference there. And it is a choice, right? So keeping that ball in front of you and focusing on those small things that you can control, but also during that, there's that leadership aspect that I believe every salesperson, really possesses. So, and just the act of being in sales now, you're not selling, you're educating, and to have the ability to connect with someone, even if it's one person, in my opinion, that's leadership at work, right? So you have to focus on that aspect as a leader and really, kind of chart a course that is good for you and everybody that you're serving in and around that. Even if it's a very small, group, it could just be you and your borrower. How are you leading you and that borrower? Now it's you and your borrower and your processor. How are you managing, leading you, your borrower, your processor? And if you focus on those small things, you get through that, and you will stay away from panic. But also another aspect of this is that what most of the time I see, and when I start to coach an originator, is organization, right? Low levels of organization. Now that monkey brain exists there. We talk about that kind of, the doubt and all of those things that live there. And typically for a salesperson, if they're good at it, it's one of those things that come from inside of them. So it's a pure talent. So they don't develop some of those other things that can take them to the next level. And that's what I try to point them to say, look, you've got to get a low level of organization. And I'm not saying run out and buy all the planners, because they'll show up with bags of, I've got planners. I'm like, first of all, you're never going to commit to that, right? Because it's too much barrier for you to do it. You've got to come up with a low barrier set of organizational tools that you're willing to commit to. It's part of that kind of that personal thing that you got to realize where you're weak, but then they want to overdo it, right? So it's just finding that balance of organization, and that usually eliminates panic. When I see anyone inside of our organization in panic mode, typically what we do is I'll dive in. What is your organizational structure? How are you managing your day-to-day activities? And very often that's the source of it. And then typically the other source of that panic isn't what's happening in the moment. It's something else outside in their life. So it's problems at home, problems in some other aspect that's manifesting in the business. And then we could see it come out, in the office towards everybody that are there to assist them. But, they're in panic mode, and they're, just really becoming counterproductive. And you got to kind of get in there and figure out what's the real root of that. And
do you think that technology is helping that, or maybe possibly even hurting it? Because I think we can all agree that technology advancements over the last couple of years, 5 years, have certainly improved efficiencies. I mean, we can't argue that. I mean, you were talking about everything you had to do inside of a file when you first started originating versus what an originator has, what their expectations are today. I mean, it's night and day. It's a very different position. But I wonder if the other outcome of that technology is that part of your brain that could be clicking to support that organizational development that you're talking about, maybe isn't happening so much. Do you notice that in the circles you're running in, the originators you're mentoring?
Yeah, listen, technology can certainly hinder them if it's a tool. It's kind of like, I two things in my life. One, I'm a child of the spell check era, right? So I'm a terrible speller,
Right?
I've never really had to develop it, I guess, in grade school or whatever, but I'm a terrible speller, and spell check has saved me, right? I'm terrible at parallel parking in a car that doesn't have a backup camera, right? And I think you can take those, examples and apply it to for originators that
Absolutely.
a lot of this stuff is automated. And I'll tell you where it really shows up. We have a pretty good technology stack. It's a very good stack. It's thoughtfully, plotted out to serve our company. Other companies may have a better, others may be worse. It's not a, better than, it's just what works for us. So when you bring someone in from outside that maybe has, really a technology stack that's more primitive, they're typically better because they're doing more, right? So their muscle memory, they're doing the backing up without the camera, right?
Yeah, right.
To be
It's
better.
almost like minor leagues, like single A ball. You don't have the same facilities, and you start moving up. That's a great point.
But then in the same sense, folks that come in that maybe have a technology stack that do more, they may struggle a little bit in our system. And, but it kind of brings them back to baseline of what it is to do what they do. And listen, technology is there to serve that salesperson. And I think that each salesperson has to find a company, a spot that's kind of right in that, that range for them. Because a lot of the sales folks that I know do not like automated things happening to their borrowers, right? They want to be in front of that
They want to
community.
control it, right?
Exactly, especially if it's anything that has to do with, a piece of the loan that needs thought, right? And that needs explanation. Automated things, just for those folks, they can't. That's how they build the bond, right? Hey, yes, your appraisal came in short. You can't get an automated message on something like that. That warrants a phone call from the salesperson that you have rapport with to explain, here's where we are and here's a solution to that. So, automation, I certainly love it, and I'd love to see it develop, but I'm still of the mindset that automation and technology are there to serve our sales folks, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with you from conversations I've had with leadership and originators over the last 12 to 24 months. I mean, this has been a huge topic, right?
Oh,
Um, the but it is interesting to kind of, so I think about you for a moment. All of the things that you had to do as an originator probably prepared you to be in the role that you're in today, where you're running an organization. It would seem that maybe the dynamics there are a little bit different, that if you as an originator have the goal of running an organization
yeah.
someday, you're probably going to have to make a leap or a left-hand turn within the organization versus learning it almost all at once. And I don't mean all of it. I'm sure that when it comes to capital markets and secondary, that there were things that you picked up along the way, but that dynamic is a lot different today.
Oh,
You're probably a little more difficult maybe to see that originator become the president or CEO unless they take a hard left or a hard right.
yeah, I think that's a good point, because they're not getting exposure to those details. And I'm a why guy, right? So it was kind of like, well, I got to lock my loan. Why? And you're going to pay for an extension. Why? So I had to understand how secondary would work. Where, now if you're coming in as a salesperson, you may not be asking enough whys. I was pretty much a why person the whole time. Whether this shows up or not. I'm not. I resist authority a lot, right? So that's kind of my thing a little bit. It's been part of my personality. So yes, I'm that why kid that wants to know, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to follow this rule? Why? But I learned a lot along the way by asking those questions, and then you kind of go down rabbit holes of understanding. Where now, especially as I bring younger folks into the business, they're not asking enough whys. I'll tell you, they're just doing it. And don't get me wrong, you want them to be in that and kind of learn those fundamentals. But asking why is a good thing. That's those questions and questioning, hey, even our system, we have a very open door policy. We do a number of things with like First Friday calls and roundtables to get feedback. And almost all development comes feedback from our sales and operations teams. Myself and our leadership group are there to react to that, not dictate that. We're not writing loans on a day over day. So we should be listening to the folks that are doing those jobs to kind of point us in those directions. But, when you're bringing, new salespeople in, they're just following the rules as if they existed there forever. And you got a leader on your hands when they put that hand up and say, why are we doing it this way?
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing it another way. Why is, that's how you've got a leader where, and if you don't listen to those leaders, they'll go somewhere else that will hear that voice. So we try to give them an opportunity to let that voice be heard here. And then if there's something that comes from that, typically it's a very good development, and you don't have to pay any consultants for that because they're living it every day and they're bringing you real world examples that you can react to enrich their life and the life of their borrower. But if they're just flying through your system and never questioning a thing, well, it doesn't mean they're going to be a bad salesperson or won't be successful. They're just probably not going to end up running the company.
And that's okay. And I know you would agree that that's okay. You touched on a point also. So when we look at organizations and how an organization, so the beauty of our industry, right, is that there's a lot of companies that do the same thing that your company does.
Oh, yeah.
With the steps along the way, there's an A and there's a Z.
Right.
How you get from A to Z can be very different from organization to organization. And there's core components that make that organization special and then make the individual or the group or the acquisition or whatever the opportunity is special as well. And one of the things you touched upon just now was really leadership style, because you like it when somebody raises their hand and says why, but there's plenty of leaders you're not going to get the same reaction when they raise their hand and ask why. I think that's one of the things that we love about this industry is that A and Z might be really, really similar, but how you get there all along the way is very different. And, so I've had this thought lately is like maybe a big goal for me, for our organization. And I think it's something I'm curious to get your point, because I think you have a psychology background in your education. I noticed that on your LinkedIn page.
For sure.
So
yeah.
I am of the belief that our organization needs an organizational psychologist on staff full time, not a consultant, not hourly, not a coach, someone who sits in the office and just observes everything that's going on. And then every day, every week, creates solutions to these emotional things that are happening. And I think all mortgage companies should have a head of like an organizational psychologist on staff.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do here.
That's kind of your role, isn't it?
Kind of my role. It's funny, I with my kind of undergrad background, my dad says to me, he's like, "What are you gonna do with that?" And, at the time, I thought I wanted to be an attorney before I found the mortgage business, and it really just kind of got into my bloodstream. But I use it every single day. And, going back and I still have some of the textbooks that, from that period of time. And I'll tell you every single day, because, really, if you can get to the heart of the emotion and the thought process, and I talk a lot about thought life, every one of us have a thought life, and, it's paying attention to that thought life is so important, because that really is your window to success, right? It's a window to get what you want, eliminate the things that you don't want, if you're listening to, and paying attention to that thought life. So, inside of a company like ours, as far as, first of all, I'm going to start every day understanding this. Number one, I don't know everything, right? And as a leader, I want to be accessible for whatever that means, and what you were talking about is folks don't like to kind of be challenged. I think you're going to see a movement towards, I'm not saying it happens overnight, towards leadership that's accessible, right? That makes themselves accessible and understands that, you've got to be really, at a peer level with a lot of your employees. It doesn't take away, your, really within an organization, your ability to lead. It doesn't, but it allows you to connect on a level that would be very different, right? So that accessibility is important. And there's no one way to lead. I think that, when I read all the books kind of coming up, like, you read about certain leaders and they all have different styles. You don't have to pick one. In fact, your leadership is a reflection of the person that you're leading. So if it's you in IT, so we have IT folks. I've got to be a different leader for them than I am with my sales team, than I am with my underwriters, than I am with everyone. So you have to be able to change your leadership and adjust it to your audience. It just can't be an egocentric, this is it, I'm the guy, and if you don't like it, well, then there's the road. Because guess what? Your best employees, the ones that you need the most, they'll take that road and go somewhere else. Right. That's willing to listen. And it's the same thing with accountability. right? Leadership and accountability are these buzzwords that are thrown around so much, right? In our industry and pretty much every industry. And I don't know what it means, right? I know what it feels like, but I don't know what it means. Like I could look up the definition of accountability and the definition of leadership, but to me, it's more of a feeling that, I get where I know that I'm in there and I'm getting the result that I want and I'm moving towards getting buy-in to get towards a result that makes sense for me, that person, and our company. The same thing with accountability. If you go in with a pre-planned action to manage someone and you can't adjust to that, man, it's going to be a one size fits all. It won't be intimate, which means it won't be sticky, right? It's got to be
Yeah.
sticky. It's got to be intimate. They've got to feel like, hey, this makes sense to me, and we've come to this conclusion together. Because if you don't do that, it's just real surface, and then those relationships typically will fly away.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and my day job, I'm supporting strategic growth, and I think one thing that you just touched on is that strategic growth is completely tied to retention. If you can get more out of the people that are already with you, you are strategically growing. It doesn't have to only come from one place. Retention is part of that entire process of strategic growth. You made me had a funny memory when you said, because boy, you nailed it when you talk about I can't define for you what these words mean, but I can show you. Did you watch In Living Color growing up?
Oh, I sure did, yeah.
So do you remember the one where I can't remember his name? Thomas is too young. I'm looking at Thomas. Thomas is too young to remember this. Remember the clown that was mean to all the kids, and he one of the kids said, what does dignity mean? And he takes the ice cream cone and sticks it on his head, and he says dignity is the opposite of that.
Yeah, Homie the Clown.
Homie the Clown, that's right. Oh, I can't believe I forgot that.
And you know what's funny? I Homie the Clown my son the other day. I put the sock inside the sock and he would hit him.
You're right.
And I whacked him with the sock and he looks at me with this look on his face. And I'm like, that's the Homie the Clown. And then he went on YouTube and looked it up.
He found it.
He watched like 10 of the videos. Yeah.
Hey, that survives. I don't care what generation you are. That's still funny. So what every mortgage company needs that we're figuring out is an organizational psychologist and Homie the Clown. We put those two things together,
Yeah.
and we're all good. Hey, something I want to ask you before we start to wrap up. Everybody in this business that takes it seriously works really, really hard, and we take this stuff home, right? And if you're not careful, you can burn out and you can start to notice things that are negatives that maybe really aren't that big a deal, and they become a bigger deal. What are some of the things that you do that give you a break, so to speak, whether it's in the office or out of the office, that those breaks actually give you the added juice to be better at what you do? I'm curious, outside of your day job, so to speak, what are some of those things that give you that extra energy?
Well, I'm a creature of routine. So, the workout in the morning, really, really helps a ton. Whatever, getting the body moving. I think there's just something about it. Obviously, it releases the endorphins. It just kind of locks you in. And I love great wine too. So if we're really talking about really relaxing, I mean, great wine certainly do it for me.
And you're gonna have a little extra this weekend after this week, which, by the way, I don't know when we'll actually post this. I should say that the date is March 20th, and anybody in this industry, I probably don't have to mention what's happening right now. First, there's obviously a virus fear that's totally serious, and I don't mean to poke fun at any of this, but we've all had the world coming to an end on us, it feels like, for the last week and a half. So my gut would say maybe you're going to partake of a little extra. I would hope. Let yourself calm down a bit.
For sure. I'll tell you that, we moved in October, right? So we moved, but, unpacking for me is like the worst thing. I'd rather throw it all away than unpack it.
Right.
But when kind of things started to shut down a little bit, one of the first things I did was I went and unpacked all of our wine and then drank a bottle of wine. And my wife's like, man, your priorities are in the right place.
A little help over here, please.
Yeah, for sure. So, other than that, it's just reading if I can. If I can read, fiction books, it helps, right? To kind of get your mind towards something that's a story that's not about, business. But lately, I'll tell you, it's been tough to break apart and trying to find that balance. So I score myself. I do things. I kind of created a little methodology called the 36 bricks, which is, how I manage, my health, my wealth, and harmony. And I stick to that, because I'll tell you, I was on the edge of really, really disaster at the end of the meltdown, right? As the meltdown kind of would wear on, I mean, it's just, you're working nonstop, weekends, no vacations. And I was really on the edge then of really just, losing it all, right? My high school sweetheart, wonderful wife, at the time, not, just wasn't getting the husband I think she signed up for. My kids weren't getting the time that they needed. I looked terrible. I was heavy. I was smoking cigarettes, which I can't even think about now, drinking more often. So I had to kind of dial that in and get to something that gave me a little bit every day. I think that's the thing, finding balance every day and focusing on those things, and instead of trying to do it all at once, on a weekend or on a day off. You've got to be able to, make this a part of your lifestyle. So that will change for me a little bit. I might be into really listening to music for a period of time, and then adjust to maybe, really spending time, looking at art, or somehow learning about something. I'll go down a rabbit hole for a period of time, and try to immerse myself in something and just enrich my life in something that I thought that I wouldn't do. That's how I ended up with wine. I was a college beer drinking, Miller Lite, Bud Light, didn't matter. And then, started to learn about wine, and then it kind of takes you down this rabbit hole, and all of a sudden it changes your life. And I got a little dog, a French bulldog, Fiona, and a little Pomeranian, Mr. Puffins. We call him Puffy.
Wait, what was, I gotta ask, was the dog choices yours, your wife's, your children?
Well, yeah, I mean, so
Just tell the truth. Which was it?
so the French bulldog, certainly my choice.
Okay.
And she was just like the sweetest little dog. But my son, at one point in time, he was the first to guess. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, would you have a dog? That would have never happened. It was just never going to happen. So he came down, and, he and I, he understands how to get my attention, make me an offer, right? Give me a presentation, sell me on what your idea is.
Come on, Dad. Why does it have to be a lesson? Just give me the dog.
That's right. So he went, did a ton of research on Pomeranians, found a breeder, sat us down, and gave us a presentation, right?
He's taking your job, Pops. Watch out.
So what do you say? So my wife and I, we go into the bedroom, like, shit, this is it. We have to do this. And she's like, well, no. I said, look, the kid took initiative. He did the research, made the presentation, dropped it on us, sold us on it, found a breeder. This has to happen. I mean, we can't say, no, that doesn't, we can't do that, or we're not going to do it. So we did. He was right. We fell in love with the dogs. Then we added Fiona. And I mean, so we're a dog family now, where I would never have thought that we'd be a dog family ever. And so she and Fiona and Mr. Puffin, they're a big part of that too, and the whole family life thing that we have together. And we're very lucky. Like the whole vibe in our house is pretty good. Even in times like this, we've been finding ways to laugh and really have a good time and enjoy a little bit more, maybe, I guess, alone time together. But if we've got to do this for maybe the next 6 months, man, we could be talking about something completely different at the end of that.
I'm about to walk out.
For sure.
Well, I was gonna wrap up a little bit with where can people contact you to learn about the 36 bricks and to get that. But really, I think we need to ask, where can they contact your son? I think we're figuring out that he's the one that might be able to coach us. If he can sell you on the dog, we can all go grab one more unit, or recruit one more originator, or open up one more branch, or grow one more billion. But no, for real, you're one of the good guys, my friend. Where promote something for me? Where can people find you?
You know what? They could find me at gomortgage.com. So, certainly they could visit there, or, on LinkedIn, or just type in my name, I guess, and to go out. I got a text number out there. That's anybody can text me. So however they'd like to reach out. The only other thing to promote is, during this period of time, I pulled together this We Are One movement that is important to us, to try to put something positive out there. So The We Are One, it's essentially signing a petition, and then you're going to govern yourself by, and if you're a business owner or yourself, by certain rules as we all go through this together. And then if they make that commitment, we donate $5 to the CDC Foundation and then to the World Health Organization. So we wanted to try to put something out there and, again, do some good. My concern is this, is that as human beings, when we face a challenge, we come together, we rally, we march, we show up, right, as in groups. And in this, right, it's kind of taking our power away, or it thinks it's taking our power away by keeping us separate. But we could find lots of other ways using technology to get together and still push that movement forward. And I think that's an important thing that we should be focusing on right now. Quickly, all of our divisions went away, right? I don't hear anything about political party, any of those things, because when you're facing a real human thing and a virus is the same threat to each human, that changes everything, right? All of a sudden, you start to really look at the things that make us the same, and not a lot that would make us very different. So I think that's a good thing. That could be the one good thing as we go through this that comes out of the other. And hopefully we remember that, right? Hopefully we remember that when this is all over.
Agreed. And so I went on yesterday and signed that petition. And so I, for one, read through it. And so anybody that's listening, if it's not something you're willing to sign, you might want to take a quick look in the mirror real quick. I appreciate the effort you're making there. And then the other thing I would throw out is that Chad Jampedro on LinkedIn, really good videos, messaging that you put out once a week. I appreciate your positivity, and you're one of the good guys. I appreciate you, my friend.
And listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm honored that you thought of me for this, and being one of the first that you interviewed. I really appreciate that. I'm honored, and I think that this is going to be great. Certainly with you leading this, man, I can't wait to watch that content. And again, I'm just honored to be a part of it. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on the walk, my friend.
All right. Thank you. Take care.